Okay, let's unpack this. We're looking at a whole series of really big infrastructure decisions happening in Texas. We're talking experimental nuclear power, spaceports, water allocation, big stuff.
Right. And when you look across the different sources, what seems to jump out is this pattern. It involves public risk being shifted, basically, while private companies, often billionaires, seem to gain quite a lot. And state policy, state government action seems to be right in the middle of it.
And that's what we want to dive into, is the stuff grabbing headlines,
Yeah.
the political fights over things like school vouchers. Is that maybe distracting from something bigger?
Possibly. It's framed in some sources as almost a shell game. While everyone's looking over here, maybe there's a massive quiet transfer of long-term resources happening. We're talking water rights, public land, even access to space. Assets potentially worth, well, trillions down the line.
So our mission here is to trace that pattern. And specifically, we need to look at Governor Abbott's role. How central has his administration been in creating the, let's say, the environment, the laws, the policies that might be enabling this?
Exactly. We'll try to connect the dots, look at the nuclear project proposed for Relis, see how that ties into water security issues in Central Texas, what happened with SpaceX down at Boca Chica.
And the state laws that kind of shield these big ventures from, well, from liability. It seems to be a recurring theme.
It does. And maybe the best place to start is where these policies really hit home for people, Bryan and College Station.
Okay, so the nuclear push. This seems to have started right at the top, at the state level. August 16th, 2023, Governor Abbott creates the Texas Advanced Nuclear Reactor Working Group.
Yeah, and he puts PUCT Commissioner Jimmy Glotfelty in charge. PUCT being the Public Utility Commission of Texas.
And this working group, it wasn't just exploratory, was it?
No, not really. Their report essentially gave the green light. It recommended setting up a whole Texas Advanced Nuclear Energy Authority, plus, new funding streams, workforce programs, all geared towards fast-tracking these things called small modular reactors, or SMRs.
Yes, SMRs. Okay, so what's happening on the ground in Bryan College Station?
Well, the local reality is that Texas A&M's Relis campus is partnering up with 4 companies. Let me see. Kairos Power, Natural Resources, Terrestrial Energy, and Allo Atomics. And the plan is to build these SMRs along with huge data centers right there.
Data centers, too. Those use a ton of water, don't they?
They do, and water becomes a huge part of this story. But first, the SMRs themselves, the sources really hammer this point home.
Which is?
That no SMR has ever actually been built and operated commercially anywhere in the U.S. So the argument is this community isn't getting proven tech. They're essentially becoming the test bed, the guinea pigs, if you will.
A test site pushed by the state.
Yeah, with the state actively working to make the regulatory path easier for this, unproven technology.
And this push for nuclear and data centers, both needing lots of water, it landed where exactly?
Right, in a community that, according to the sources, had already seen its water security basically collapse.
Collapse how? What are the numbers?
Pretty shocking, actually. The claim is that Bryan and College Station's projected long-term water security just plummeted from maybe 50 years down to something like 6 to 10 years.
50 years down to 6. That's drastic.
It's a massive change. Think about what that means. 6 to 10 years of water security. How do you plan for the future? How do you issue bonds for infrastructure? It makes things incredibly risky. And sources allege this huge reduction was, kept quiet, not really shared with the public or even the city's bond rating agencies.
Wow. Some misleading investors, potentially.
That's the allegation.
Yeah.
Because those agencies rely on stable projections.
So how did the water disappear so quickly? What allowed these big diversions?
The sources point straight to Austin, to the Abbott administration and the state legislature. They apparently okayed major water allocations and diversions. Some went to other cities like San Antonio, Georgetown.
Right.
But a big chunk also went to state-subsidized industry. The prime example cited is the huge Samsung chip plant they're building in Taylor.
Ah, the chip plant, needing massive amounts of water.
Exactly. Yeah. Highly water-intensive by design.
And wasn't there federal involvement, too? I remember something about chip manufacturing.
Yes. Critics point to Senator Ted Cruz sponsoring a bill. This bill specifically helped greenlight water-hungry chip factories in places already short on water, like Texas and Arizona. And importantly, it apparently bypassed some of the usual environmental reviews. People involved locally didn't mince words. They called it stealing Bryan and College Station water.
Stealing their water.
And then, this is the part that locals find, frankly, insulting. After the water was effectively stripped away, The state turns around and pushes these new super water-hungry projects, the nuclear reactors and data centers, onto that very same community.
So take the water, then bring in industries that need even more water.
Precisely. One local described it feeling like their community was a car, stripped of anything of value, and then just used for the next experiment. It really highlights what critics see as the administration's priority under Governor Abbott. Enable the big corporate projects first, deal with the local consequences later, if at all.
That pattern. State facilitation, shielding from liability. It sounds like it extends beyond just water and nuclear in Central Texas.
Absolutely. It flows right down to the coast, to Boca Chica. The playbook seems remarkably similar. We just swap water rights for, well, access to space.
Right, Boca Chica. Originally a wildlife reserve, now it's Starbase, a new Texas city.
Yeah, incorporated pretty recently, May or June of 2025. And again, state policy was the key driver here. Lawmakers, with Governor Abbott's backing, gave Starbase and the Texas Space Commission the power to just close off Boca Chica Beach and State Highway 4 whenever they need to.
Overriding the local county, Cameron County.
Exactly. Overriding local control, overriding public objections, a direct loss of public access mandated by the state.
And there's a liability shield here too, isn't there? Something about a space tourism law.
The 2012 Texas Space Tourism Law, signed by then-Governor Rick Perry. Critics argue it basically protects rocket companies. If things go, well, boom. The interpretation from sources is that it tells companies, fly, explode, repeat, just make sure the customer signs a waiver.
So minimal consequences for failures.
That's the argument. And the core critique is that SpaceX got access to this prime coastal real estate, this wildlife reserve area, essentially for free. It's framed as the state handing over a valuable national space resource without fair compensation to the public.
Which brings us back to that shell game idea you mentioned earlier.
Right. The scale is just stark. The public debate gets intense over, say, a few billion for school vouchers. That's what's on the news. But compare that few billion to the potential value of the space resources handed over. Some sources estimate the annual profit potential from a global Starlink monopoly could be anywhere from $600 billion to maybe even $1 trillion.
$1 trillion a year.
Yeah.
Compared to a few billion in budget fights.
The difference in scale is staggering. If that estimate is even close to accurate, it really puts the political distractions in perspective, doesn't it?
It really does. Some sources draw a historical parallel here, too, talking about economic justice.
Yeah, they point out others who came as slaves to Texas never were able to get a homestead that might have had oil below, yet Elon Musk gets in line ahead of all Americans. It raises fundamental questions about fairness. Who gets access to these potentially massive public resources, and on what terms?
And there are claims of direct political influence tying into this as well.
The sources do mention that. Specifically, an alleged $50 million donation from Elon Musk to the Trump campaign. And they link that donation, rightly or wrongly, to potential influence over NASA budgets, suggesting it might have tilted things in favor of SpaceX against competitors. It points to how the political system might be enabling this whole process.
All this seems to have really damaged trust locally, especially involving Texas A&M.
Deeply. Locals feel the university's involvement flies in the face of its own code of honor, the Aggie Code. And Aggie does not lie, cheat, or steal.
How so? Where's the connection?
Well, the critique breaks down like this. Lying, allegedly, by using non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, to keep information quiet and framing what looks like an industrial site as just research. And stealing, potentially, by actions that could render local property values worthless. To no value is the phrase used, in order to develop these proof-of-concept technologies for outside companies without real compensation back to the community.
Which leads to a really chilling question about safety, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. If the community feels they can't trust the institution, A&M in this case, to be straight with them about building 4 industrial-scale reactors, how can they possibly trust them to give timely and honest warnings if there's, say, a small radiation leak or some other accident later on? That breakdown of trust has real safety implications.
And this pattern, regulatory blind spots shifting costs onto the public, it seems to extends even further.
Yes, it's presented as a systemic issue, not just isolated incidents. Look at the oil and gas sector.
What's happening there?
As of September 1st, 2025, state policy under Abbott apparently gave oil producers a pass. They got regulatory permission to dump treated fracking wastewater directly into rivers and onto farmland.
Treated water. Sounds okay, but what's the catch?
The catch is what's in the water, even after treatment. It's reportedly loaded with unregulated chemicals called PFAS, perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Nasty stuff. They're called forever chemicals because they just don't break down. And they're linked to cancer.
So letting companies dump cancer-causing chemicals into rivers and onto farmland.
Essentially, yes. The policy seems designed to save corporations the cost of proper, safe disposal. That costs the long-term health burden. The environmental cleanup gets transferred directly to the public via contaminated water and land.
Faced with all this, the water issues, the spaceport, the PFAS,
Sure.
what are people demanding? It sounds like the reaction's pretty strong.
It is. And the demands aren't just for small tweaks. Citizens are proposing some really radical changes aimed squarely at reversing the policy directions set under Governor Abbott. They want a fundamental shift in who benefits and who bears the risk.
Okay, like what? Let's break them down. Water first.
Right, for water restoration. The demand is for the federal government to take that $4 billion allocated to Samsung and use it instead to fund a massive desalination pipeline. Using Israeli technology, bring water from the Gulf all the way to Dallas. We're talking a huge pipe, 21 feet in diameter, supposedly capable of supplying the equivalent water usage of 7 San Antonios. Restore that long-term security.
Wow. Okay, what about accountability for the current situation?
Direct demands on Governor Abbott. Stop the launches from Boca Chica immediately. Halt all the nuclear testing and data center construction at A&M right now. And, significantly, stop using campaign donations to fund hand-picked political candidates, which they see as a way to control the legislature unfairly.
And then there's the spaceport issue, the resource itself.
This one's really radical. They're demanding a new law. It would mandate that 99% of all profits from any commercial launch activity out of Texas spaceports go into a citizens' trust fund. Basically, ensuring Texans get the financial benefit from what they see as their state's resources being used. It's about democratizing the potential profit.
99% to a citizen's trust. That's ambitious.
Anything else?
Yeah, regulatory fix. Demand Abbott amend that 2012 space tourism law so it doesn't cover commercial ventures anymore.
Oh.
Take away that liability shield for profit-making launches. And impose a 5-year ban on building new data centers to give the power grid ERCOT and the local utility BTU and the water supply a chance to recover and stabilize.
So looking at all this, the risks for local communities seem pretty severe. They really do. Constant noise pollution from potential 24/7 industrial drone activity is mentioned, the risk of property values just collapsing near these sites, and potentially skyrocketing electricity bills for everyone if these unproven reactors don't work out as planned, or if the data centers just drain the already strained grid.
Okay, so let's try to sum this up. What's the big picture emerging from this deep dive?
Well, the consistent thread seems to be that policies under Governor Abbott have actively enabled, even facilitated, the transfer of potentially trillions of dollars worth of resources. We're talking water, clean environment, access to space, moving from public domain or control towards private interests, SpaceX, Samsung, the nuclear companies, and crucially, state law seems to be simultaneously insulating these private interests from liability and real accountability.
So it's not just about individual deals, it's about the system itself.
That's how the sources frame it. It's the creation of a system where a very small number of private actors can potentially wield economic power on the scale of nation-states. That $1 trillion annual profit potential for Starlink is one example cited. And that fundamentally changes the power dynamic for everyone else.
Which leaves us with a pretty challenging thought, doesn't it? If the main political fights we see are over, maybe more visible but smaller scale issues like vouchers, while this huge generational transfer of wealth and resources is happening more quietly through specific regulations on space, water, chemicals like PFAS, how does the average person even begin to protect their basic assets, their home, their water, their health?
It's a tough question, but accountability isn't impossible. There are still channels. The sources specifically highlight the FAA's Starship Draft Environmental Impact Statement, the EIS. The comment period, docket FAA 2024-1395, is actually open right now until September 29th, 2025.
So people can still weigh in directly with the federal agency overseeing the launches?
Exactly. It's a chance for citizens to demand a full environmental review, demand safety transparency, make their voices heard on that specific project, at least.
So the message is, use the information, look past the surface level political noise.
Right.
There's even a kind of symbolic call to action mentioned, like a modern Paul Revere signal 3 short honks to pass the word. The billionaires are coming to take over Texas and our nation. Bit dramatic, maybe, but it gets the point across about awareness.
Right. It's about ensuring the conversation includes these fundamental policy decisions that are shaping the state's and maybe the nation's economic future. Stay informed, stay engaged,